Hi, thanks for joining this episode of Real Talk, Real Trust. I am your host, Ryan Picchini. I'm so thrilled that you're with us today. The promise of this series is building trust in the age of AI and ensuring that we are guiding you along that journey to help you build authentic relationships with your customers. So we know it's a very interesting and dynamic time for marketers and IT leaders trying to figure out how to build relationships that are going to last long term. So I'm joined by Noz Urbina as well as Zain, our CEO. Thank you guys for being with us today. Let's do a quick round of introductions before we dive in. So Noz, I'll let you kick us off.
Sure. So I'm Noz Urbina. I'm founder of Urbina Consulting. I have been consulting in what is now called the omni-channel space for 25 years. I got into structure, multi-format, but there's lots of words for it. Linked data, structured content, the Web 3.0, right out of university. So it's been quite a journey. And now my passions, I'm really into your podcast mission there, because our mission is actually helping brands build the kind of relationships with people that people have with each other. And I'm really interested in authenticity and how trust and truth are part of that.
Aligned mission statements is one of the many reasons we wanted to have you on the show today, Noz. Thanks for being with us. Zain, a quick intro on your side too, please.
Yeah, hi, Zain Ishaq. I'm CEO at dotCMS, which increasingly seems like a job to think about how AI impacts every piece or side of the business. So, this topic is obviously one of the top topics that we think about. And Noz, it's a pleasure to have you. And absolutely, sounds like you're the perfect person for this particular episode.
Thanks, Zain. Before we get into the meat of every episode, we like to have a little fun, get them leaning in on their chairs and put our guests on the hot seat. So let's start with a little hot seat, rapid fire. I'm going to challenge both Noz and Zain to keep these answers as short as possible. Bonus points if you can keep it to under a sentence. So I'm going to start with Noz. We'll go with you first. Since you are in Valencia, but you're from Canada, hockey or football?
Neither. Don't care.
Zain, hockey or football?
I'm gonna take your football as not Americans football, but soccer as you call it. So I'm gonna go with football, and I'm pretty sure Noz's response would have been soccer if you termed it too. It's a world sport, so football for me.
Football for Zain. Noz, just to tune our listeners into your region of the world, your favorite thing about living in Valencia?
I get to live on the Mediterranean but work in North America.
Wow, let's see. Lucky guy. Zain, I'm going to pass the next one to you to start. Hybrid or headless?
Oh, hybrid, no questions. I can go on, but pure headless. We've made our thoughts known on this many times. I think it's overhyped, and it leaves the marketing teams disempowered. So hybrid is the way to go.
Bonus on the depth of your answer, deduction for the length of your answer, Zain. Noz, to you, hybrid or headless?
Whichever one suits my project best. I think it's the tool in question, not the paradigm.
Very good. Noz, I'll start with you on this one. Are we in an AI hype cycle, or is this a transformational shift?
That's definitely a both.
Great answer.
Hype's raging, but the transformation is real.
Awesome. Zain?
Yeah, I would go with the transformational shift, obviously with a lot of caveats, but I'll stop there since I got penalized last time.
That's the point, is to put you guys on the hot seat a little bit. Thanks for a little fun to start this episode, Noz, Zain. Let's get into the topic at hand, which is building an effective content strategy in the age of AI. For many of the marketers and IT leaders that we talked to, I was just at a dinner in New York last week. They recognize the huge opportunity that's in front of them, but it is also a daunting set of considerations, workflows, discussions that need to take place in order to utilize AI effectively. But I'd like to kind of start with why it matters. And it's always a good idea to start with the buyer or the customer before we talk about the technology. So Maybe Noz, can you talk about some of the shifts that you've seen in the buyer journey? And I want to talk broadly across different segments, whether it's B2B or B2C, in the last 12 to 18 months.
Well, I think that the thing that I'm seeing most, it surprised me the last 18 months, has been the amount of hate that's being thrown on Google. So people are getting frustrated with search. Lots to say about this, lots to say about how, we're part of the problem. But between, the ad revenue model and marketing eating the world, people are just not happy finding stuff anymore. So that's a huge one. And then the other one, which is even more recent, is this plummeting in trust. People are really feeling concerned and skeptical all the time. So I think those are the two massive ones. I could rabbit hole on either of them.
Well, we'll dig into that, Noz. It's fascinating because we've never been more connected. We've never had greater access to information, information that can be curated for us. And at the same time, there's this breakdown of trust. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. There's some cultural reasons, there's some technology reasons, but there are reasons that I think that we can control as marketers, as IT leaders, to gain some of that trust back. So I'm excited to dive into that with you. Zain, any major shifts that you want to call out in terms of how buyers are interacting and their process to make decisions in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a shift. I would just call it an acceleration of, an already existing, change, or shift, if you may. So yeah, I mean, buyer journeys are happening more and more digitally, as we just said. So maybe before, if the buyer would be 50 to 60% in their sales cycle before they reached out to you, they're now 80, 90%. Obviously, AI tools have made it much simpler to compare products, filter out products. And the last thing I would say about this is I feel content is no longer your first impression. I think it's the only impression, and it has to be that's your only shot at building trust, to Noz's point. And with the explosion of content, no wonder, it's leading to chaos and an erosion of that trust.
Yeah. And I think you alluded to it, but Noz, maybe I'll ask you to weigh in. This idea of an effective content strategy and the importance of it, right? If you look at a CEO, a CMO's priority list in terms of, what they need to optimize to grow the business, it feels like content strategy is rising to the top because it is that conduit to a relationship. But can you just comment on the importance of content strategy and how it's being viewed within a lot of the organizations you talk to?
Well, there's a lot going on in that question. I find that it's different. There's different kind of priorities across B2C and B2B. I think, for example, trust in content in B2C is more of a problem. And this, things like the search experience and cutting through the noise is harder in B2C. In B2B and B2C, content strategy and effective digital content strategy for me is always about, do we understand the overlap between our business goals and our users' goals, whether they are business or personal goals? How do our objectives overlap and line up? So where can we insert ourselves in a useful, value-added way into their journeys? And I think that that's been true for 25 years. But it's been easier in the digital realm because the competition wasn't quite so vicious. There wasn't so much content, there wasn't so much noise, there wasn't so much distrust. So what's happening now is we have to go back to basics and get a lot more disciplined than I think we're used to in the digital space of thinking about the strategy and the thinking and the objectives and the alignment behind everything we do, so that we are hyper lean and focused on doing things that are going to add to that relationship, as opposed to chasing clicks and traffics and traffic and eyeballs the way that we tended to be used to for the last 20 years.
Yeah, Noz, I love that idea of what do you want to do as a business to grow? And then how does that overlap with what the customers want to have? What's their experience? And getting back to the basics and giving them the things that they need with your content strategy, not in an authentic way, because the visibility and the competition is one part, but there's this subtle headwind that I think we need to be aware of, which you've alluded to a few times, which is the erosion of trust. So how does the erosion of trust, how does that play with go-to-market teams? What are the additional questions they need to be asking themselves and thinking about, in addition to like, hey, I need to cut through the clutter in a very, thoughtful way. But at the same time, it's more than that. It's also this underlying distrust that's out there. How should they be thinking about that? What are maybe some of the questions they should be asking themselves that headwind?
So one of the first things that I see with teams that I want to address is there anybody in the room who's trying to dupe people into coming in to their properties? Are you chasing clicks, or are you thinking about that relationship? Which is building on my previous answer. I think what's happened, and also on the previous answer, things that have happened quite recently, is that in the same way that television went through a transition where, there's the Hollywood stars and TV stars were like larger than life supernatural beings, and now in today's day and age, we see their Instagrams and we find out who they're dating, and we watch them go on vacation. The veneer of specialness and distance has been pulled off. I think that's happened to all brands. I think that Google and online and digital had a kind of magic to it, and now people are kind of looking at like, is this like, let's say, the ethical sourcing of whatever it is I'm looking at. If we look at what happened with Twitter, whether you love it or you hate it, there was a sudden like shift in how that brand was perceived and how everything on that platform was perceived. And then that had to do with the people behind Twitter, how that was changing. And so now we've got, their average consumers considering, how algorithms are being tweaked to address them. Whereas that entire mental model didn't exist in the public sphere 10 years ago. So we're in the same way that 10 years ago we were saying, you have to speak to a more educated consumer. We're saying it again. The consumer's education is caught up again. They understand the mechanisms. They understand the concept of sponsored content. They know what a paid link is. They know what a sponsored article is. They know what product placement is. These are all the marketing secrets are now in the public consciousness. So how we now have to be authentic ourselves and not creating brand authenticity in a workshop and saying, okay, what is the authentic self we want to pretend we are? But how do we actually build an authentic relationship? How can we be clear? Look, this is what we bring you. This is what the value we bring to the table. This is why we think it's useful for you, because we understand you, and demonstrate that, as opposed to kind of trying to make the biggest bang and attract the most attention. For me, that's a key phrase. We talked a lot about the attention economy for the last decade, and now I think we're moving into a relationship economy. Or even we use the term sometimes at Urbina Consulting, the intimacy economy. So have we built, what is the quality of this relationship? Is it just a relationship? Am I just your supplier? Or are we building some kind of intimacy? Do you know that I understand you? Do you know that I care about the things you care about? If that's true, do you know that I'm paying attention to the things in the market or in society, depending on what kind of business you're in, that matter to you? And do you know that I understand your journeys and how you move through the world and what your priorities are and what your pain points are? All that stuff is asking more of the GTM team in terms of understanding journeys, understanding and segmenting their contacts, creating topical plans. Everything's got to go up a level in sophistication. And the temptation can be to, fire hose the market, because we have the power to do that even better than before. And I think that customers see that and are in fact preemptively going, well, am I building a relationship with somebody who's going to fire hose me, who's going to I don't know if you know the term love bombing. Is this brand going to love bomb me to within an inch of my life, or is this a brand that's going to respect my boundaries and understand that we've got a reciprocal relationship here that is good for both partners? And I think that's changing the mentality of GTM teams as well as the technology and processes.
Yeah, Noz, the word that kept coming to me when you were going through that is longevity. When you think about the relationship economy, there's such a temptation based on our culture to try to win someone over by love bombing them or sending them sponsored content that's clickbait, right? Because you have all those tools at your disposal. But if those tools aren't used in an authentic way to build a long-term relationship, because trust is built through a series of interactions, right? And so how do you use those tools effectively to make sure that at any point in that journey, you don't love bomb them, whether it's in store or whether it's through a digital touch point. And so it's a unique opportunity, but there's a certain amount of patience, diligence, utilization of the tools and technology that are available to you to build those relationships. But I think that there is going to be, like you said, a transition back to the brands who are patient, who get to know me, who nurture me with the information that I need on my terms are the ones that are going to win. But it's a long game. Yeah. It's a long game to build a brand. It always has been. It's just there's so much temptation today. And the biggest tempter of all is AI. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. We've kind of alluded to them. I'll start with you, Noz, and I'll transition to you, Zain. What are the biggest risks when building a content strategy that's supported or powered by AI?
Biggest risks. I think that there's what I'm seeing is that your average marketer is not really thinking about how AI can be used by them as a tool. They're using it as a force multiplier. Let's keep our old metaphor and say, let's say a fire hose accelerator. So rather than saying how do we use AI throughout the content lifecycle, from initial research, processing of research, distilling of insights, making a topical plan, drafting content, creating briefs, keeping everybody in the team, agencies, internal subject matter experts, whomever needs to be involved in the content lifecycle. How can I use AI to keep everyone on the same page so we're really all laser focused on the prize here? They're thinking about it like, okay, I'm going to do all my usual marketing stuff, and then at the end we're going to AI it so that it goes and explodes 10 times bigger on the market. I think that's the number one place you can fall down, is throwing AI at the end of the process to 10x your output, as opposed to 10xing the quality of your work from the get-go, before you've even thought about what you're going to say, using AI as teams to help you optimize the whole process.
No, I think that was one of the best nuggets to date that we've had on the podcast, which is everyone thinks about amplification through AI. Hey, how do I create more content for the 8 segments that come to my site? Because I used to want to create 10 pieces and I can only get to 3. But this idea of how do you create richer experiences with AI that's what people want. They want authenticity. Now, in some cases, there is more that's needed, but a better, more connected experiences. I love that. And it's something we will certainly sit on and think about and bring back to our meetings.
Can I jump in with one particular?
Sure. Yeah.
So a good example for me for like helping people with a mindset shift is, personalization in the bad way. Like, how can I hoover up all your data so that I give you this hyper personalized thing that shows that I've been kind of following you around the web? You can use AI to do that, and it's very tempting to do that. But I like to talk about personalization and contextualization. So I understand where you're at right now, and so I'm going to dose you the right message for where you are in your headspace, where you are in your journey. Not use that to go, hey, I know I saw you liked hockey better than football, or I saw you liked Valencia. Like, don't use the useless data. Use the useful data.
Yep, that's great. It's a great point, because you have all the data at your fingertips, plus the ability to contextualize with it. It's a matter of intentionality, which again is a long game, right? It's about longevity. Zain, how about for you? What are some of the risks that you see associated with using AI to build an effective content strategy?
Yeah, I mean, probably nothing that hasn't already been said. Maybe less eloquently, I can try. So AI sprawl is obviously something that, has been mentioned. AI can scale content, but it can also scale garbage. I think that's the biggest one, which will eventually lead to other things like, erosion of authenticity in the brand, brand dilution. Soon every brand is saying the same thing. They all sound the same. So optimizing into sameness is how I like to say it. And yeah, I mean, just going back to the earlier kind of track where, Noz said, your content is no longer your, first impression or your entry point into your, brand and assets and whatnot. It's an experience. So now you have to think about your content. It needs to be everywhere on every channel. So it has to, be omni-channel, so to speak. It needs to work 24/7. And then thirdly, to Noz's point, it has to be contextual, and substantiated and authentic. So that's the challenge. And yes, AI helps every one of those instead of just, plugging it in the end and just having that AI sprawl that I mentioned.
Yeah. Zain, optimizing the sameness is one that really jumped out at me because it is, if everyone's using the same LLM and the prompts are relatively similar, then the content that you're creating that was sort of the long tail that you never got to, you're going to start to sound like everyone else. And I've even seen it on, within our segment where you look at competitive pages and they relatively say the same thing about competitors. And that there's been some utilization of LLMs to get that live. So it is a risk, because then there's someone who's conducting research or on a buyer journey, they can see through that. That's the thing folks need to remember. We all use LLMs. We all have a sense of what the output feels like if we're in this sphere. So I think we've covered quite a bit on the opportunities and risks. Obviously, the counter for some of the risks is this ability to deliver really deep, authentic experiences and do them at scale if they're kind of boxed in and thought about correctly, as opposed to letting AI sprawl our operations and if it's input in the right place. But maybe I want to get a bit more tactical here, Noz. Move from the theory of what a good content strategy looks like to we do have listeners who are like, how do I build an effective content strategy? I've been on the same kind of platform and systems. We've had the same thought process for a few years. I'm getting pushed now to revamp things. Let's say an organization, we have a CMO on the line. They're like, hey, I want to revamp my content strategy. Where do I start?
So if I was talking to CMO, I would say first thing to do is think, this is an opportunity to spend time thinking about for my people to start thinking about, to be able to think about people more than they've ever been able to, because they were spending so much time in, admin and production and logistics and other things that are not value added. The most valuable thing human beings can do and human beings will be able to do going forward as, we go through this great AI transition is be the ones who are thinking about other people. That's what we do best. So I would start with looking at the process. How do we do content? How do we plan content? I would start to think about use this chance to do a reset. Go back to basics. What are we about? What do we talk about? What do we talk about? That translates into like a topical map. Who do we talk to? That's your segmentation. How do those correlate? Does everything we talk about interest everyone we talk about? Probably not. So what are all those mappings? So to rethink those and start to codify them, because what we have tended to do in the past is have all that stuff in PowerPoints or in just a PDF somewhere or some kind of Miro board, which is not the best way for AI to understand stuff. So, break that down, use this chance to synthesize it. You can use AI to help you synthesize this mess of stuff you've got and come back down to those fundamentals. Who are the people? What are our topics? And then how does that map onto journeys? So, how do these people move through to getting their objectives accomplished? And what are the stages and transitions on those journeys? And what are transition signals? How do we know when are people moving along a journey? How do we know that they might be dropping off? And how do we target that with these topics that we want to talk about? All that essentially gives you is a bunch of schemas, to use a technical term, or to be a bit more relatable. It sort of gives you like a meta content strategy or a metadata strategy that says, okay, the topics and audiences, journeys, stages, transition points, etc. And that is sort of your backbone. Start building that backbone so then the AI has something to work with. That part you need to have your people and their subject matter expertise involved in. Your marketers, your customer experience researchers, your customers, do fresh interviews with their customers if you don't have good data. This is your opportunity to kind of go back, reset that, and start codifying it in a way where any AI tool that your people are then going to be working with has this solid backbone of what are we about, who are we talking to, what are the priorities, how do we map from our priorities to their priorities. If none of that is in place, people will just be falling back on whatever the LLM, what you just said, and what Zain said, whatever the LLM happens to have. It won't have that understanding of your business. So work out that understanding first, and then use that to be plugged into whatever AI strategy you're building.
Awesome. Thank you, Noz. Anything that you might add to that, Zain? If someone is revamping their content strategy, where they should start?
No, I mean, I think Noz covered pretty much everything. I guess I would say that let AI surface insights, but let humans make the calls. At the end of the day, we have to remember that there is a human on the other side who's going to consume that content and make the decision. So yeah, using AI to surface all these insights on, what are the questions we need to answer, or what are the customers thinking about? What are the gaps that exist in our current content strategy? What is competition doubling down on? Like all of these kind of research, so to speak, you could absolutely, AI can be really helpful there, but you have to synthesize and you have to make those decisions, and you have to keep them consistent and authentic, I think.
Yeah, I like the combination of what you both said. So Noz, understanding who we are, what we solve for, what the journeys are. And Zain, I almost saw your input as it's a bit more about the market, right? You want to start with who you are first as an organization, but what is the market talking about? What are your competitors talking about? That doesn't mean that you want content around them, but it's just visibility in terms of what the landscape looks like, right? And what are the trends that are in the landscape that you might not have from your own internal perspective that AI can help you capture and say, hey, here's 5 other things that we should consider talking about based on a bunch of prompts and a bunch of research that we've done. But that's not the core work. That would be additive work to who you are and what you want to talk about to add value. So I think that's the combination was great. Noz, did you have
Can I
a
jump in there with a
comment?
metaphor there?
Sure. Yep, please.
So I like to tell people, we do a lot of AI enablement and, AI trainings and workshops with our own methodologies. And whenever I'm doing that, I always kind of give people the image. Like, imagine if you were onboarding 1,000 interns or 10,000 interns, depending on the size of your business, like way more people than you've ever had to onboard at the same time. What would you need to do to make sure that they were getting productive as soon as possible? You would need like all your core stuff that I was just describing distilled down into this quick reference, like playbooks and reference cards and all this stuff. That's how you want to feed your AI. That's how you want to start the foundations of your AI. I see so many people just trying to chuck all like 150-page PowerPoints times 10, throw that at the AI, and then ask it what the content should be. No. Well, so when you were summarizing what I said, for me, what was missing was that structured, machine-readable result. Or it doesn't have to be machine-readable. A human being should be able to read it and go, yeah, okay, now I get you now. I've read the 10-page handbook. I'm ready to work. That's the output that they're kind of reaching for. It's techie and non-techie at the same time.
Yeah. essentially what is the metadata, being able to read out the metadata and the nuances of what you're going to create. And I think that might be a good transition to what I was thinking about, which is we talked about how you should think about it, but let's talk about the process to get things in place in order for you to have the right content strategy, the right organizational structure, the right tools, so then you can start acting on that content. Do you want to talk folks through the process to start to build and deploy that the content strategy, not some of the best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, this is one thing we're doing a lot. This is like our most popular courses and offerings these days are helping people through this bit. And it's, as Zain was saying, using the AI to extract the insights, understand the personas. We do things like we spin up the personas in AI, so you can basically chat to your data rather than just having, like the poster that says, I'm a mid-level marketer in North American pharmaceuticals industry. You actually turn that into an AI, so everybody in your business can talk to it from the different perspectives. So creating that kind of foundational background that we were talking about, creating that kind of topical architecture, like this is what we talk about. And then I would say your messaging hierarchy. So what are our messages that we want to say in these topical areas? And then, so I talked about then using the tools to help you build a journey. You take that journey understanding. You can also use AI to help you explore the journeys. That's one of the main things we're helping people with. But what are your journey metrics? Is journey velocity? Is it satisfaction? Is it trust? Is it, longevity? Is it, repeat buyer? What is it that you want to measure on these journeys that tell you, yeah, this person's moving along and they're moving along with an experience which is going to fill all those long game goals you talked about. Once you got that worked out, then you can start building your asset plan. And I think Zain said this as well. Here's where you can be building your messages and then using AI to help you. Once you've got all this really, really worked out, now I can say, okay, here's the message. Now I want this incarnation for this persona in this channel. And now I also want it in that format for that channel, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where you can start to use AI's production capabilities to say, okay, I've got everything worked out. I know the messages. I even have a piece of content, like the answer to their question. Now I just want to render that answer out in various formats and various ways, depending on the channel, the market, et cetera, the regulations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that's the kind of process when you can actually start to get producing. And then finally, omnichannel metrics, using AI to bring all that, the resulting data together, and picking up again on what Zain was saying, now I've got all this stuff. I've got all this data coming in from all these bloody systems. How do I turn that into insights again to feed back into the process for the next iteration? So that's my kind of high level picture of the workflow. And then my messages along the way, build correlations to commercial metrics. So it's very, very hard for a marketer to say this many people consuming this webinar equals this many dollars. But you can do things like say, the population in group A who is high engaged with content has double the lifetime value from population B who doesn't consume our content. You can start to make correlations and say, well, if you come to our webinars, you're twice as likely to buy when a salesman calls you. Like your sales team will go nuts for that statistic. You haven't said it's worth X many dollars, but you said, hey, look, our content can give you business insights, and our content can make probabilistic statements to say, yeah, this is probably true about the business.
Right.
The next one is test manually, then automate. Don't just throw your idea out there and put all this automation dollars behind it first. Do it by hand, then automate. And then finally, coming back to what I was saying earlier about avoiding sprawl, the phrase that I'm using these days, value, not volume. How can we create maximum value, not maximum volume? And I think if you follow that process and apply those three best practices, you're on a good start.
I have a follow-up question, Noz. Maybe I missed it, but for me, one thing that may be missing is how do you train on your brand's voice or tone of voice? Is
So
that
that was one of the assets for me that you have to be working out at the beginning. So I was saying, what are you about? Who are you talking to? One of I guess I didn't explicitly mention it, but for me, a fundamental one in there would be, how do we sound? So your tone and voice, distilling that down, providing a good bank of examples so that the AI can replicate your tone and voice. You have to be very methodical about that, or else you're going to get very generic sounding content.
And Noz, that comes to life in the messaging hierarchy to the asset plan, I would guess, right? That's sort of where the rubber hits the road. Once you've created the messaging hierarchy, and then when it goes to the asset plan, you need to watch to make sure that the models translated the voice into the asset plan, and then you should have the foundation set for the deployment, correct?
Well, and I think the Zain is adding something that I left out, is that you do have to have real tone of voice documentation. Like, you sound like this.
Hierarchy and the asset plan.
Yeah. So the message is the message. That's what we were trying to say.
Yep.
How we sound, how we want to say every message, that's a separate document. So you got to have your tone and voice worked out and referenceable. We sound like this, we don't sound like that. We use these words, we don't use these words. We title, this is how we title things, this is how we don't title things. All of that does have to be available as a nice, clean reference for the AI. And it's exactly as if you were bringing on 1,000 interns. Yep. And if you wanted them to give you consistent brand appropriate output, they'd need to have that quick reference card. How should I phrase this? Or should I put titles as a question, or should I put titles as a statement? Or all that stuff's got to be written down.
Noz, it feels like we're going to have to be back for part 2, because Zain opened a can of worms, which is one of his favorites, which is AI kind of helping drive brand voice and keeping the brand, in lockstep of what it should be. So I feel like he's got like 5 follow-up questions. I'm going to hold them because we got to wrap here in the next few minutes. I do want to ask one more question before we get to you leaving our listeners with the final thought. But you said correlation metrics, and I love that. I love that because one of the biggest challenges when you walk into a C-suite and say, hey, I want to revamp our content, I want to reinvigorate our content strategy, they want to know the ROI of it. And I think this idea of correlation metrics per journey is great. I, as someone who was in the advertising space for a number of years, time spent is one that I always think about. Time spent usually has a direct correlation. I'm going to ask kind of a loaded question and let you guys both hopefully squirm a little bit and then try to answer. What is the timeline of ROI when you think about revamping the content strategy? If someone said, when am I going to start to see ROI that I can report to my executive leadership, and what will it be? What would you say?
I would immediately go into consultant mode and go, that depends on what are you talking about doing? What is your current state? You ask me, how fast can I get from A to B? And I'm like, over a mountain, or across flat ground, or over water. Yep. So it's not just because you show up and do AI that you're going to have X time to ROI. It's totally dependent on what your current challenges are, how healthy your other systems are, how long is it going to take you to get all that stuff I asked you to get. Do you have it already because you're super buttoned up and you bring on agencies every other week, and so you already had this whole perfect set of reference documentation, which is going to go right in the AI? Or you got a bunch of people who just have been there for 20 years and they just know, and you got to extract it from their heads. So that's could be instant, like could be tomorrow. I have organizations where I see people applying stuff, and things are going to market within a few days that are better than they would have been. I don't know how you would calculate the ROI on that, but it can be an immediate benefit. Others, you're going to need to clean house for a little while before you start seeing anything. So we could be talking months.
Thank you, Noz. That's a tough one, but very well answered. Zain, how about you? What is the timeline for ROI for implementing a new content strategy?
I guess if done right is the assumption. Within 3 to 6 months, I think you should probably see some, again, reduced content production times and boosted engagement. As I said, assumption is if it's done right. But then I believe the real traction might begin at the 12-month mark. But I do feel like content strategy is a compounding asset, to use a financial lingo, since I'm a financier originally. It just exponentially grows from there on. I think 12 to 18 months later, once you found your tone, you found your channels, you found your audience, and once things start clicking, I mean, not that, we have been through that with this podcast, for example, but that's what I learned about after studying, other people who've done it successfully.
Great. Thank you, guys. Very astute answers from consultant world and from the world of finance. I think some really, really great jokes aside, some really great insights for our listeners. So thanks for that. We're coming to the end of our time. I'm going to ask each of you to just give one or two takeaways for our listeners on things that they should be thinking about or doing when it comes to building an effective content strategy in the age of AI. So Noz, why don't we let you have the final word? Zain, one or two takeaways for our listeners.
Yeah. So for me, maybe start by asking, is your content helping or hiding? The second question is, are your teams overwhelmed and buyers confused and content siloed? I think that's a really good indicator if you're producing a new asset for every channel. And then I guess the answer would be, you don't need more content. You need a new strategy. To Noz's point, value versus volume. And yeah, lastly, I mean, AI is a game changer, but it requires, a certain depth, clarity, structure, and trust. Yeah.
Thank you, Zain. Noz, how about for you?
Right. So I don't want to just kind of summarize or reiterate what I've already said. So I think the thing I left out of all this was, so all the stuff I said about getting your proverbial together, and then do you have anybody on the team who actually, or do you have the right, and I'm sorry to say this as a consultant, but do you have the right, either the consultants or the staff in place who actually understand this stuff? One of the number one things I'm seeing is like sort of a blind leading the blind. Some AI vendors go in there and go, we've got a magic wand. And the marketing teams go, oh my God, we want a magic wand. And then it's only 6 months to a year later that everyone sees the trouble that they've gotten themselves into. So somebody does have to, who is close to the project and your initiative and is going to see it through, has to have a deep understanding of how these things work and how they could go wrong.
Thank you, Noz. I think it's a great point. Everyone is talking about AI. The folks who have spent time to lean in, learn it, and have implemented it is a select few. So I want to thank Noz from Urbina Consulting. You can find him on LinkedIn for further questions, comments, the opportunity to work with them. Zain, as always, thanks for joining. To our listeners, hopefully we'll see you on the next episode of Real Talk, Real Trust. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.